Harshman's getting on now.
Mr. Chairman, we're live.
Thank you very much, Katie. Welcome, everybody. We're running a little late this morning. We're trying to wait for more members and get a quorum, but we're going to go ahead anyway. We won't take any actions without a quorum, but we will be able to look at some of the materials. Good morning, Chairman Burkhart and Chairman Harshman. How are you guys?
Good. Good.
Great. It's good to see you. And, I think Senator Beitman was not going to be available, but we are waiting on Rothfuss, who says he's having some computer problems and would only be able to be with us for a short time. I haven't heard from Representative Wiley. Anyway, the RFP, we've kind of been talking about working towards that today, and staff has done some work that I think would be very illuminating. And let's hear from them on a couple of issues. The first issue, I think, is the possibilities that they envision with respect to more of the economic work being done in-house. And I think that Don Richards is present in the room in Cheyenne, and he probably would be the best person to take us through that. I note that for the members that aren't here, have this recording available, and they'd be able to hear this briefing as well as the public. So, Mr. Richards, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
So just go right ahead, and thank you for all the work you've done, which is considerable. You might describe that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Don Richards. I'm the Budget and Fiscal Administrator for the Legislative Service Office. I do believe we have posted a very short presentation online, as well as made it available to members of this subcommittee. After your first meeting of the subcommittee, staff from the Research and Budget Fiscal divisions within LSO identified a fair bit of information that had been requested. So we wanted to conduct a preliminary survey within our available resources. So we devoted about 9 staffers for a half day to identify available data in the area of electric taxation and related potentially relevant studies that had been prepared either in-house or by other entities, be that government entities or academic entities. This effort is not complete. We're continuing our survey work, and we'll continue to add to this as we get additional information. I'm now speaking to slide 2. And our first identification of quantitative data. Most of this comes from the Energy Information Administration, which is a federal repository of data, where we can get revenue, and that's revenue from electric generation sales, the number of customers, the average electricity price by consumer type, that is commercial, industrial, or residential. And we have all of this data by state and by provider type. And provider type would include, say, co-ops or investor-owned utilities or municipal utilities. And there are 13 years worth of this type of data. We have not summarized it yet, but we will do so at the direction of this subcommittee. We also have electricity and general sales by state. What this information on the second bullet would provide is the ability to determine what states are exporters and what states are importers of data. After speaking with Chairman Case, we also have identified data regarding new, proposed, under construction, and proposed for permit electric generation. We're trying to get that information by state as well, which will give an indication of the types of electric generation by fuel type that are currently under consideration across the nation by state. On slide 3, we also reviewed the tax summary. So this is not really the quantitative data side of our analysis, but this is how other states tax electricity generation. There has been work done in this by the National Conference of State Legislatures, and I believe co-chairman Burkhart is privy to this information. LSO has prepared it previously, and it is a robust set of information. We've supplemented that from the Council of State Governments, CSG, as well as the Bloomberg Tax Research. We will also likely supplement this with the Tax Foundation. This way, we will be able to identify the tax scheme, if you will, in states related to sales and use tax, gross receipts, excise taxes, special utility taxes. An example of that is our 1 cent per megawatt hour wind tax in the state of Wyoming, as well as a corporate income tax. I think stepping back, what we're trying to do, not suggesting that we will get all of the way there, but imagine yourself as a new college graduate who is considering two job offers. One might be in New York City and one might be in Denver. Well, there are multiple websites that can compare salaries in those two states, the various cost of living. One state might have an income tax that would be deducted from one's pay, where another tax would not, or another state would not have such taxes. And the new college graduate then could compare the effective value of two different job offers in two different states. Obviously, we're not looking at job offers here, but we're looking at electricity generation and what is the effective tax scheme in various states by fuel type. Mr. Temte within LSO has summarized this previously, although it has been a while since we've done this. And unfortunately, the resources that are available, BNA, NCSL, and CSG, will need some additional review and supplementation. The reason being is we can just evaluate the state of Wyoming, and we've identified through the entity's definitions, they're not really picking up all of the relevant information. So we will need to expand on that analysis. On slide 4, we also tried to identify prior studies specific to Wyoming, and 3 of them are worth mentioning here. There are others, but the first one is particularly timely. A University of Wyoming March 2024 report estimated the impact of state tax and incentive policies on the cost of wind development. The positives about this is it addresses almost all of the 10 western states that are within Wyoming's intertie. However, a downside with this particular study is it is limited only to wind, so it doesn't consider fossil fuel generation like natural gas or solar or coal or nuclear generation. The next study that we identified is an in-house study. It is dated. It was most recently done in 2016, and it compares the taxation schemes of coal, natural gas, and wind generation. The downside of this study is that it is only relevant to Wyoming. So it does not consider other states like Utah or Idaho or other states of potential interest. And then finally, the last study, widely known, it's often referred to as the E3 study, which is an acronym for Energy and Environmental Economics. They were put under contract initially by the governor's office in 2010 in the state of Wyoming. They also developed a wind costing model. One downside of this model is while it looked at all western states, akin to the UW model, it is limited only to wind taxation, and it does not look at some of the other fuel supplies. So these are kind of what we have identified in terms of prior studies. And then on slide 5, I look at the ongoing research that we are continuing to do, and we have reached out to a number of associations, both public and private, as well as government entities and some academic literature. To date, we have found some particularly beneficial raw data. We have not found a study that looks at all fuel types across states. So we're still missing really the big or best approach. And finally, on slide 6, we outlined the missing components and some from staff's perspective, some proposed next steps. We are limited by the availability of data to compare state outcomes. An example of this is in order to compute the impact of a corporate income tax, say in Oregon on electric generation taxation, we would need to know the level of income to test that against or use that against the tax rate. And unfortunately, by generation, that data is not available, at least in our review. We also face a challenge that I think all economists that work in this area face, and that is the inability to calculate the elasticity measures for electricity production. There's also elasticity measures for the consumption side as well, but that's a key ingredient that we have missing. Finally, there are some real challenges about practical implications. We would strive to provide anything to the subcommittee in the September timeframe, which would provide sufficient time for either the Joint Revenue or Joint Corporations Committee to digest the information in October or November at your final meeting of this year's interim. In light of these constraints, we're proposing limiting our analysis to 10 Western states plus Wyoming, so a total of 11. These are the states that are impacted by Wyoming's regional electric grid. Secondly, we would look at all of the detailed aggregate state electricity production, which I've previously mentioned, and we would summarize that, provide it in graphical format by sector, by price. We're also proposing to update the E3 model. That is probably one of the larger lifts of this, both on the federal tax scheme as well as the productivity. This is a publicly available model, but it has not been updated in the last 15 years. And then finally, we have reached out preliminarily for some assistance outside of LSO. This would be dependent upon only if there is money left over from the legal RFP. It's very clear to us that that go, no-go question with respect to the legal analysis is the priority of this subcommittee, so we would not jeopardize the completion of that review or any funds necessary to address the legal questions for this subcommittee. With that initial presentation, I would pause for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. I'm impressed, and everybody, they had 9 people working on the survey of available data. Everybody spent a half a day on it, and I think this is very impressive. So questions for Mr. Richards? Anybody?
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman?
Go ahead, Senator Burke.
No questions. I'm familiar with the quality of work that our budget team does and I'm very pleased with the information we have already. And I guess I would just tell them proceed, continue.
Sounds like a good plan. Representative Harshman, any thoughts? You're muted, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, appreciate staff, Mr. Richards, appreciate your staff. And again, great work. And I think as Chairman Burkhart said, we'll just keep moving forward. Appreciate it.
That sounds great. So I think you got off easy, Mr. Richards, but I sincerely appreciate the coordination that's been developed here. And we'll talk more about what an external review could do for us and what the capabilities are. I'm particularly impressed that you're willing to take on the update of the E3 model, which I think carried a lot of weight in its day to get us former policies. So I appreciate that. I know that at least I'm informed that you can't receive assistance from the creators because someone actually has bought the rights to that. But there is a publicly available version, and that sounds great. If there's nothing more from Mr. Richards, we might let him off the witness stand here. And Katie Adams has done some preliminary legal work, which will help us to focus the legal questions. So let's go to her if that's possible.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Katie Adams, LSO. We did a little bit of research yesterday and came across a federal statute that may be relevant to some of the legal considerations for the RFP. And I'll just go briefly over that statute in one of the United States Supreme Court cases that discusses that statute. So it's 15 USC 391. And it states that no state or political subdivision thereof may impose or assess a tax on or with respect to the generation or transmission of electricity, which discriminates against out-of-state manufacturers, producers, wholesalers, retailers, or consumers of that electricity. It goes on to state that for purposes of this section, a tax is discriminatory if it results either directly or indirectly in a greater tax burden on electricity which is generated and transmitted in interstate commerce than on electricity which is generated and transmitted in interstate commerce. In 1979, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision entitled Arizona Public Service Commission versus Snead. And the general issue in that case was that New Mexico had imposed a tax on the privilege of generating electricity within its borders. And the question in that case was whether that tax conflicted with the federal statute or the United States Constitution. And so as background, in 1975, New Mexico enacted the Electrical Energy Tax Act, and the act imposed a tax on the privilege of generating electricity at 0.4 of a mil on each net kilowatt hour of electricity generated, which amounted to about 2% on the retail value. The tax was imposed on all companies generating electricity in New Mexico, but that tax could be fully credited against the company's gross receipts tax liability. And so in effect, the generating company's 2% tax was completely offset by the credit against the retail sales tax when its electricity was sold in New Mexico. But if it was sold out of state, there was no gross receipts tax liability against which to offset that tax liability. And so on appeal, the appellants argued that the New Mexico tax was invalid under 15 USC 391 and also under the commerce, due process, and import-export clauses of the United States Constitution. The US Supreme Court held that under the Supremacy Clause, the tax was invalid by reason of 15 USC 391. The court did not reach the substantive constitutional issues. As background on 15 USC 391, the court explained that Congress passed the Tax Reform Act of 1976 and included 15 USC 391. The Senate Finance Committee proposed that provision, and the provision was directly aimed at the New Mexico Electrical Energy Tax Act. And so in its discussion, the court decided that 15 USC 391 clearly operated to carry out the express intent of the Senate to invalidate that New Mexico tax law. The court declined to look at the entire tax structure of New Mexico in deciding whether or not it violated that statute. It held that the tax was a tax on the generation of electricity. The tax credit provisions of the act ensured that locally consumed electricity was subject to no tax burden from the electrical energy tax. And because the electrical energy tax itself indirectly but necessarily discriminated against electricity sold outside New Mexico, it violated the federal statute. The court rejected an argument that the federal statute exceeded the permissible bounds of congressional action under the Commerce Clause. And there was a concurrence. 2 justices concurred that the New Mexico tax violated the federal statute. And they rejected New Mexico's argument that the federal statute accomplished no more than the Commerce Clause. They essentially said that it does something different than the Commerce Clause and goes beyond what that prohibits. And so this just might be an additional consideration for the legal consultant in this work, and maybe a reason to keep the RFP fairly broad in identifying the legal issues that the legal consultant will look at, because there may be additional legal issues that none of us have thought of.
Thank you so much. I think that's excellent work. Are there any questions for Katie? Katie, I was going to make a couple of observations. That's a fascinating case. I'm very glad we're discussing it. I'm trying to think if there are any differences as we are proposing in Wyoming. One thing that comes to mind is and I'm not that familiar with the specifics, but the credits that the court ruled benefited New Mexico customers. I think that might be a bit different in the fact that we're allowing for credits. One of the bills had credits against other taxes paid, which sounds similar to New Mexico, except for that it wasn't specific to the tax burden on our Wyoming customers. The credits applied to all customers and all sales. At least that's the way I envision it. Do you understand the distinction I'm trying to make here? And maybe I'm all wet, and but it seems to me if you reduce the total tax burden as applied to everyone, it avoids that specificity of giving a break just to in-state people. Does that make sense? Possibly?
Mr. Chairman, I think that makes sense. And really, this case is just intended to be a general sort of overview of this statute and how it's been interpreted with respect to one New Mexico statute. And I think there were some footnotes in that case that talk about other states and how there are distinctions between different statutes. And so there are certainly distinctions that could be drawn between anything that Wyoming does in this New Mexico statute.
Great. Representative Burkhart, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Katie, question on those referenced cases. Were any of those used as Wyoming's argument in arguing against the carbon tax that Washington wanted to impose? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Anything else?
No.
There might be one more point. That New Mexico case might be used to argue against the proposal that we can offset Wyoming tax obligations by getting rid of our sales tax or reducing it at the same time the general electricity tax is put in. And I'm seeing a distinction there in my mind, but I'm sure that the arguments will be made that is kind of the same thing as the New Mexico case. One more point that I would make is about in the recent Rocky Mountain Power rate case at the Public Service Commission, there was an issue about really an emissions tax on a gas plant in Washington State that sort of sets up the New Mexico situation. Washington imposed the emissions tax, but at the same time gave a credit to in-state customers, and somehow gave them less liability for it, which seems to me that's right on point to what the New Mexico case is about, and the RPSC rejected that approach. But Katie, any thoughts on either one of those? And it's okay. I realize this is all very preliminary, but all of a sudden we are talking about the right questions, and I really appreciate your work.
Mr. Chairman, no additional thoughts. I think there are various legal issues that could come up related to this that I think you've identified too. In the Commerce Clause, we have this federal statute, we have the multi-state protocol, and all of those types of issues that the legal consultant may be looking at and determining sort of how this fleshes out with the legal implications of the generation tax.
Thank you. I agree with you. Anything else from the members? So this is kind of the staff prefaces that we've had so far. We still have the RFP on the table. Of course, that's the purpose of today. We were hoping to get a little farther on it. I didn't use the SharePoint document. I just flat ran out of time, but I did submit a list of the legal questions, and along with a proposal to have a advisor or external review of staff work on as far as the economics go. And I submitted that, and it's available on the website. That's kind of a beginning talking point document if people want, or we can begin in another way. But does staff have that document handy? Is there a way we could pull it up on the screen with all my typos and everything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we're getting that up.
I should have warned you about that. And I think where we're going to end up today is we'll take public comment, and then we'll have to leave this hanging until we get more members to weigh in on it. But This is the document I sent out earlier. And it was early this morning, and so everybody, this is kind of late night work. But take my glasses off so I can see it. Basically the first is two legal areas need illuminating. The first area relates to the U.S. Constitution, the Interstate Commerce Clause. Couple of questions. Can Wyoming assess, it's supposed to be a tax on the production of electricity that applies to everyone equally? And can Wyoming also at the same time unilaterally eliminate our sales tax and electricity sales for in-state consumption? The second legal area is more specific to
Chairman?
our, yes.
A quick question. I didn't get this until really late, just before this meeting, and that is this online for the public to see also?
Yes, I believe it is, but they got it at the same time.
Okay,
Staff, is it available online for the public?
Mr. Chairman, it will be in about 5 seconds. I added
Oh.
the other items, but not this one. And they do have it in their electronic notebook that I sent, the update this morning, but it'll be online very, very shortly.
Let's wait a minute. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Burkhart. That's very perfect. It's just a couple of paragraphs, and we are not going
Yeah.
to formally take any action on any of this today. So,
Right.
but I greatly appreciate that. I thought it was available to the public online. So, really good call.
Mr. Chairman, a question for you. Maybe I misunderstood. I thought, excuse me, this meeting was to, just approve the RFP and we'd get into these kind of questions at a later time once we had a contractor. Is the intent to put these into the RMP or the RFP?
Chairman Burkhart, that would be my intent. I think it would be difficult for a contractor to sign on to something if they didn't know the questions we were asking.
Okay,
I'm very worried about the timing and being able to complete any kind of analysis in a timely manner to provide input to committees that then have to put it into the general session. I tried to keep this really simple. And it's just these two areas of legal plus a catch-all that says, hey, what else have we not thought about? And then to have an external review of the staff economic work. And so, Katie, would it be available online now for the public? And can you tell them how they can find it, where they go?
Mr. Chairman, I'm refreshing as quickly as I can, and it should be there momentarily, however long it takes to go wherever it goes. But if people online want to go to the upcoming live streamed meetings on the LSO website, and they can find a joint electricity taxation meeting at the top of the list. And to the right, it'll list details. And under details, it lists meeting materials. And currently, the Arizona Public Service case is the last one, but if they keep refreshing, this should show up when it gets through the land of Google.
And then, Katie, right now, everybody's seeing the same screen that we have, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And
So-
apparently that item is now available online.
Okay, so everybody, it is available online. You can access it however you'd like. But you should be able to see this document on the screen in its entirety, and this is all that it is. So in the time that we've been discussing it, I would imagine that people have been reading it. I realize this isn't the best situation, but we are not going to take a vote. We'll just propose to gather input from the rest of the committee and probably have to finalize the RF, at least get some direction in an email poll from the committee after they've reviewed all this. But that'll give the public a chance to contact them and us and things like that. So just continuing, the second area of legal area is more specific to our relationship with regulated utilities, such as Rocky Mountain Power, that serve in interstate markets. The relationship between states and Rocky Mountain Power and their associated companies is governed by the Multi-State Protocol, or MSP. The MSP determines which utility expenses or cost responsibility are considered unique to a particular state or shared between all states in the territory of the utility. So it's a series of questions. The essential question that then is, does a new utility tax violate the principles established for interstate regulation under law and agreement? What are the MSP-related implications of eliminating our sales tax on electricity sales for in-state consumption? Does it matter if the new electricity tax is on sales or production? We heard some discussion about that. We've heard both advocates have talked on both sides of their mouth in a way. So sometimes a sales tax, a gross receipts tax might be more acceptable with respect to the MSP, or a specific excise tax, or we've heard one or the other can be used to violate the MSP. And the final question is, what are the credits that we're talking about giving under some proposals for Wyoming taxes already paid? Not every bill has this, but that is a possible policy choice. And then finally, we asked the legal consultant to identify other potential legal issues or problems that we have not been considered above. So the very last paragraph is, in addition and likely under separate contract, we would like assistance with respect to economic analysis to be performed in large part by our in-house LSO staff. We'd like to entertain proposals for a project advisor to work with the LSO staff and review support products that address the likely impacts on industry development and our competitiveness with respect to other states. So that's kind of the nutshell. I'm not sure that anyone has made any other proposals. I don't pretend to say that this is the only possibility or that it's complete or that maybe it's overly broad. I'd love to let people mull on it and think about it. But so that's what I'm kind of considering would go into the RFP as more of the specifics. And we could decide things like budget. We could put most of the money towards the legal analysis and less money for review, for example. But any thoughts on this from the people on the committee members on the call?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think our staff has done a great job. And I would hate to do anything to ruin that. I think we need to continue with that. So I would think, we can weight this, on the cost more towards the legal aspects, although I think we have, in-house legal abilities, but it's always good to get an outside view. So I would say probably look at the RFP trending more towards the legal matters than the financial issues. Our staff has done a great job already, and I guess I would let them continue. And I think maybe, they can use outside help as they choose and take the money out of the appropriation for this subcommittee. That's just a thought.
Thank you very much, Chairman Burkhart. I tend to agree. Chairman Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think Chairman Burkhart said it probably what all of us are kind of thinking. I think we're kind of heading all in the same direction on this. So appreciate it. And we'll just keep moving ahead on this, keep learning. But I think the RFP lays it out pretty good. I mean, really, I think, the gross receipts versus the production piece and the credits, I think, of Wyoming taxes already paid. The first thing on all this taxation is fairness. I mean, are people treated fairly? And so I think that'll all kind of come out in this, kind of see who's paying, who's already paying taxes on electricity produced. So thank you.
Thank you both. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm particularly impressed with the staff really, they went and figured out what we were doing or what we were asking, and they brought some good work in. They really, really did. And I think if we would have had this level of analysis maybe last year, we might not even be talking about an RFP. We'd be just talking about going ahead and getting her done in-house, both pieces. But it's not bad to have some outside experts weigh in and be on our side. So is there anything else we should do before we open it up to public comment? My thinking is we need to include the other committee members in our discussion, let them review this and weigh in. But there are members of the public that have made an effort to be here, and I'm happy to hear from them if they wish to provide input. Is that okay with you guys? All right. Katie, who's first? I'm gonna let you handle the public comment.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Choquette has her hand up first, and she'll be joining as a webinar. We also have, as a participant, we also have Brett Moline, Bruce Johnson, Chad Lemon, Cindy Delancey, and Ryan Andrews on the list.
Let's just go down that list if that's okay with you, Katie. And you can just handle it. Ms. Choquette,
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this work group meeting today. My name is Kara Choquette, and I work for Power Company of Wyoming, which is hopefully a wholesale power provider, independent power producer for the state of Wyoming. It would be the largest proposed power plant in the state, so we have a very strong interest in this issue and have been following it for well over 10 years now. So I have some, I guess, constructive ideas for the LSO and for the research from the economic piece. One thing I do want to note is that a permitted power plant or even a power plant that's under construction is not the same as a built or operating power plant. So if you look at the 13, for example, wind power plants that have been permitted by the DEQ and the ISC since 2012, only 6 of those are actually, as of today, built and operating. I want to first talk about the scoping initial identification of available resources document. Just to point out, number 1, it talks about conducted and ongoing research. The document doesn't appear to suggest talking with or seeking inputs from anyone in the wholesale power provider space or this independent power producer space like us. We are standing ready and definitely willing and able to help provide data and resources as we can. I would also suggest that the business perspective of other Wyoming independent power producers have to compete to be selected would also be considered as part of that study. Secondly, the retail electricity price is an interesting data point, but it is not a measure of wholesale power plant competitiveness. In actuality, the retail price of electricity includes much more than just the cost of electricity. It includes things like power distribution costs or wildfire mitigation and a whole array of other things. Thirdly, as we have stated before, we don't believe it's appropriate to compare mineral resources and non-mineral resources. Our wind power plant is competing against other wind and solar plants in other states to be selected. We're not competing against coal, which is largely shipped east of Wyoming. The delivered cost is where we have to be competitive. But that said, if that 2016 LSO study is going to be updated, it was called Wyoming Comparison of Coal, Natural Gas, and Wind Estimated Tax per Megawatt Hour. So if that's going to be updated and relied upon, I just wanted to note, as we did back then, that study did not accurately reflect the property taxes and the sales and use taxes that wind power projects have to pay and that have to be considered in any economic or tax analysis. We presented an analysis to the Revenue Committee at the time that showed that totality of the taxes approach, and that's what the University of Wyoming studies in 2016, 2019, 2022, as well as the most recent have showed. I would just ask that any update also use that totality of the taxes approach. By the way, that 2016 study showed that 6,000 megawatts of new wind would produce about $2 billion in tax revenue for Wyoming's state, local, and schools, state, local governments and schools. Finally, on the comparison of the tax structures, either major Wyoming service area states or the Western intertie states, we suggest that if the legislature wants a full and accurate understanding of all of Wyoming's electricity markets, any study has to look at not only all of the WEC states, but also North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Wyoming power plants do currently export power into those markets. In fact, Laramie River Station has one of their units that is fully connected into the Eastern Interconnection and exports power currently into Nebraska, which, by the way, has a lot of wind generation, even more than Wyoming. And then in reference to the LSO memo outlining electricity generation, I just want to point out again, Wyoming is not competing against states like Alabama, Iowa, or Vermont. Those are not reachable with our current or even planned electricity network today. And the memo, while it does note in other states electricity taxes are imposed in place of other taxes, it does not include that in Wyoming, the current generation tax on wind is in addition to these property taxes and sales taxes. So I just want to remind the committee again what I said last time, which is Wyoming has to compete to be selected. Wyoming only has a 4% market share of all power plant capacity in those 14 states. Only a 5.4% electricity share as of the 2022 EIA data. And then if you look at the entire NAICS code industry of all electric utilities in Wyoming, all the rural electrics, municipals, major electrics, and the independent power producer space like us, that represents an assessed valuation of $800 million for the state of Wyoming. To put that in context with other non-mineral taxpayers, all railroad state assessed valuation is $646 million. All ag land that's locally assessed is valued at $410 million, and all natural gas pipeline state assessed valuation is $174 million. And this is according to the Department of Revenue's 2023 annual report. So this industry is already providing very significant and important non-mineral revenue to the state. The studies that are referenced here typically do not include the cost of transmission, which is a very real factor. It is for coal. It's EIA says coal is about $13 a ton. But on average, $25 a ton to ship. It's no different in the electricity space. We have additional costs that have to be considered in our economic viability. So I just wanted to offer those comments, and again, our help and our resource if this study is to go forward. Again, this is 10 years we've been having these discussions. This uncertainty that these constant conversations create is really not helpful for anyone in the independent power space.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Ms. Cochet, your comments, do you have those in writing? You talk a lot faster than I can write, and I would like to consider those if you could provide them to the committee.
I'm happy to provide my notes as prepared.
Go ahead,
usually
Ms.
not
Choquette.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, I'm happy to provide my notes as prepared, although I admit I did not follow them as closely as they may appear in writing. So, but I'm happy to send those along. I'm happy to share those with the entire committee, Mr. Chairman, if that's of request.
You bet. I think that'd be helpful. And you're certainly welcome to prepare a summary document that adds more of what you weren't in your notes, however you want. We'd love to hear from you and work with you. Thank you very much. Katie, who's next?
Chairman, each of the remaining 5 attendees have declined to join as a panelist. So if any of them have changed their minds, maybe they can raise their hands online, please.
Yeah, you guys, if anybody wants to offer a comment, you're certainly welcome to. And I take it there's nobody in the room? I mean, there's important people in the room, but there's no public comment in the room.
No, Mr. Chairman, no one hopping to the microphones.
So committee, we've kind of had these reviews. We can kind of mull on it and suggest that our friends from the committee that weren't here review what's been done today, and maybe we can come up with a bit of direction. It seems like the thinking is driving towards the RFP as it kind of now is proposed. We'd like to have it more in a final form, perhaps, to be able to review and share with the public. We're also going to get some written material from Ms. Choquette and any other people that want to offer as such. So Katie, when could we try to get the committee back together for a quorum, and how much time would the staff need? Is a week out of the question? Is 2 weeks? Tell me what people might be thinking. Don, Representative
Chair-
Burkhardt.
Mr. Chairman, looking at my calendar, which I kind of have in my head,
I hear it's
this,
bad.
the rest of next week, I might be able to do something on Friday, but the rest of that is out. The following week might have some open time, and then by then we're into July. So I guess just propose a number of dates and we can decide if we can make it or not.
I agree with you completely. I don't think I could do anything before Friday next week, and then next week might be better. Staff, I don't want to, what are your thoughts about our timing? The idea that it would be to have another, hopefully very brief meeting, maybe about the same length, to look at more of a written RFP and think about things we might have missed, let people weigh in. Mr. Richards, Ms. Adams, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, we are feverishly looking at the committee calendar, and at a first glance, it would appear that the 27th and 28th of June might be the most open, but staff can certainly rearrange to make things work if there's a date that's best for the committee.
Mr. Richards, what's your thinking?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, several budget fiscal staff do have a conflict on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The Joint Appropriations Committee is meeting next week. That being said,
Oh, who are they?
I think Mr. Tempty or others, Kelly, might be able to more than adequately respond to any of the subcommittee questions. I think just from my perspective, the completion of this, not only the RFP, and then seeing if there's any leftover funds, time will become of the essence at some point in the not too distant future. So just a general comment that sooner rather than later would benefit the workflow.
Agree. That kind of pushes us back towards next Friday.
Yeah.
Representative Burkout.
That's what I was gonna suggest, Mr. Chairman, although I am out of state most of that time. I'll be back late on the 20th. I agree with the time is of the essence. When you look at how fast June is already going, my July calendar is getting full and they've started on August already. So yeah, I think maybe the 20th might be a good date.
And if you're traveling, sir, would you be able to maybe participate if we try to keep it short by Zoom?
Depends on the time.
Okay.
And where I am. I will be in a lot of places that have no connectivity for computer or phone.
Will you be wearing fishing waders?
Actually, probably not. I wish.
I wish you were too. Let's try to do something on Friday, and let's let staff kick it around a little bit, but basically a week from today, and we can make that final call on Monday, I guess, if staff wants to think about this, whether it's even doable. Staff, you're certainly allowed to veto, and the veto would push it into the next week. But Friday, if we could get some time during that day, could be late afternoon, could be early morning. And we're just going to keep going on the direction we've started.
Okay.
All
right.
It'll be more of a
Mr.
touch
Chairman?
base. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Chairman Harshman and I may have a pointed conversation with anyone else from the House side of the committee for not being here.
That'll be fun. So let's actually select the time for the next Friday on Monday give people a chance to talk and think about it. I would propose it be kind of earlier in the morning or late in the afternoon on Friday. That might be the best, but just a proposal.
Either would work for me on the 20th.
Okay. With that, we have to include the other committee. We don't have enough people to actually take an action, so we'll kind of just be continuing this meeting over till next Friday, the date to be, or the time to be provided. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, staff. I actually think you brought our thinking along a very great way, and you did some good work. Really appreciate it. thank both you members and all the public for attending. Take care.